I'm Laura Trevelyan in Washington. The headlines. President Trump will soon deliver his first State of the Union address against a backdrop of ongoing investigations and political high drama. His first year has seen rows over immigration and claims of Russian meddling set against rising employment and soaring stock markets. We'll look at what the president is expected to say.
I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore. Also on the program, the UK's Prime Minister Theresa May heads to China on a mission to get the world's most populous nation to buy British. And watch the skies for a 3-in-1 lunar event. A blue moon, a super moon, and total eclipse, all happening at once.
This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Good evening. It's 1 a.m. in London, 9 a.m. in Singapore, and 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C., where we're just 1 hour away from Donald Trump's first State of the Union address. It's the moment every year when the Commander-in-Chief lays out his position before Congress and the country on where the U.S. stands and where he wants it to go. In excerpts released by the White House, we know the president will call for a bipartisan approach to immigration, as well as a massive infrastructure plan. I'm joined live from Capitol Hill by our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher now. So, Barbara, the president is going to tell us there has never been a better time to start living the American dream. What else is he going to say on that theme of the economy?
Well, it's going to be a very upbeat approach, we're told, Laura. The theme is a strong, proud, safe America. Who can argue with that? And it is going to emphasize a lot economic growth over the past year in the United States, for which Mr. Trump is going to take credit. He's going to talk about his tax reform or tax cuts, his deregulation. He's going to talk about low unemployment rates. He's going to talk about job growth. And he's going to say this benefits corporations, which is important for the economy. America is open for business, but it's also benefiting all Americans. That's going to be his theme, and he's quite eager to promote this. So I think we're going to be hearing Trump the winner, not Trump the fighter, not that sort of angry nationalist tone you sometimes heard at his campaign rallies. And it's important, Laura, because it's an election year, the midterms. So there are Republican lawmakers sitting in the seats who are going to be up for election. They're thinking, is this a Trump that will help me or hurt me? Is this a speech that I can get behind for the campaign? I think Mr. Trump will also have that in mind.
And Barbara, it's pretty fractured and divisive there on Capitol Hill behind you right now, but the president, it seems from the excerpts, is going to try and reach across the aisle to Democrats. What's he going to say?
Well, it sounds like he's going to make a bipartisan pitch for compromise on immigration. He put out a proposal last week to try to overcome differences on immigration. It will be a tough sell because it is quite contentious, and you do have Democrats who are bringing as their guests immigrants who they feel have suffered from Mr. Trump's policies, but that is one thing he's going to put forward. He's also going to put forward a bipartisan pitch to deal with the infrastructure, to improve the infrastructure. Again, something that both parties can agree to, but especially Democrats will be listening to whether he offers any details on how this will be paid for. We understand it's going to be a pretty broad brush stroke event. The details will probably come later, so you might not get a fulsome Democratic response to that right away. And then you do have other things as well. You have a number of lawmakers boycotting the event, up to a dozen, because of the things that they oppose about Mr. Trump. So many of them are from the Black Caucus, for example, and they say his policies are racist, his words are racist, and they're protesting. One of them said he would attend in order to stand and look racism in the face. So you do have that kind of contention and division in the hall, and we'll see how much Mr. Trump's words can lift beyond that.
Barbara Plett-Usher live for us there on Capitol Hill. Thank you. And we'll have Donald Trump's State of the Union address in full. That starts at 0200 GMT on Wednesday here on BBC World News. And we'll have full coverage and analysis from Washington throughout the proceedings. And our correspondents will be following the address online. Rajini Vaidyanathan will be in the Congress chamber during the event, live tweeting the latest developments. Find her at BBC Rajini V. And Anthony Zurcher will be providing analysis from Washington on his Twitter feed. He's at AW Zurcher.
Let's now take a look at some of the day's other news. And the owners of a seaplane which crashed near Sydney on New Year's Eve say they cannot understand why it was flying in the area. The accident killed 5 members of the same family from Britain and the Canadian pilot. A preliminary report also says there are no obvious signs the plane was damaged before it hit the wall. For more, let's cross over now to Sydney, and we're joined by my colleague and BBC correspondent, Howell Griffith. What more can you tell us about the safety report on the crash?
Well, they've had a month now to inspect the plane that was pulled out to the Hawkesbury River after that crash on New Year's Eve. And from what they can tell initially, there are no signs of breakup or problems with the actual structural integrity of the plane before it crashed. No suggestion of a bird strike, for example, or there being any control problems before the impact with the water. They've also been looking at eyewitness reports. It sounds like the plane engine was running okay. These are obviously initial findings, but they've been through all the obvious avenues, looking at the safety record of the pilot, which they say was good. However, questions have been raised by the company themselves.
And the company says, Howell, that they can't even explain the plane's location.
Yes, and as part of the report, they published what they think was the flight path, and it looks as if it veered away from the normal flight path, going out of an authorised area and into what's known as Jerusalem Bay, where the company chief exec, Aaron Shaw, says they were not authorised to fly. Now, he says he can't explain that location, nor the steep 80 to 90 degree banking angle turn that the plane seemed to make before impact with the water, before it nosedived down into the river. He says that's inexplicable, particularly considering the experience of the pilot, Gareth Morgan, who tragically died as well.
All right, briefly, Howell, what's going to happen next?
Yes, it could take a full year for this investigation to continue. They've appointed some experts, including someone from the British Air Crash Investigation Unit, who will be able to keep in touch with the cousin's family. We don't know yet if there are plans to repatriate their bodies, but clearly this is an investigation that has many people viewing it from across the world.
Howell Griffiths joining us from Sydney. Thank you so much for the update. Also making news today, an extremely distressing story from Delhi. Police say an 8-month-old baby girl is in critical condition in hospital after allegedly being raped by her cousin. Police say the child was admitted to hospital on Sunday. A 28-year-old man has been arrested. Pratiksha Gildalal has more from Delhi.
The girl's parents rushed her to hospital after they came home from work to find the child's bed covered in blood. The girl's 28-year-old cousin has been arrested and charged over the assault. According to the Delhi Commission for Women, the girl has undergone a 3-hour-long operation and sustained some serious internal injuries. The cases of child rape across India seem to be on the rise. Almost 20,000 such cases were reported from across India in 2016. Even though the scrutiny of sexual violence in the country is growing after the infamous gang rape of a young medical student in 2012 in Delhi.
Pratiksha Gildalal in Delhi. The head of the Emergency Management Agency in Hawaii has resigned after a false alarm of an imminent ballistic missile attack caused panic last month. The employee who put out the erroneous alert has been sacked. U.S. officials said the worker, who hasn't been named, mistook a test for a real emergency after hearing the end of an announcement saying this is not a drill, without realizing it was just an exercise. The Yemeni government has at least 21 people have been killed in 2 days of fighting between separatists and government-allied forces in the southern city of Aden. Hundreds more are injured. Separatists have surrounded the presidential palace in the city with ministers holed up inside. The American actor Mark Salling, who had pleaded guilty to possessing child sex abuse images, has been found dead. U.S. media reporting that he killed himself at his home in Los Angeles. The 35-year-old gained stardom in the television series Glee. He was expected to be jailed for at least 4 years. Britain's Prince William and his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, have begun a 4-day visit to Sweden and Norway by hitting the ice in Stockholm. The royal couple went head-to-head with a penalty shootout in the sport of bandy hockey. The Duke scored 2 goals and the Duchess only 1. They then went on to meet members of the Swedish royal family. And take a look at this. A rare Picasso painting expected to fetch for $50 million when it's auctioned off next month in London. Well, the work, Woman in a Beret and a Check Dress, or Femme au Beret et la Robe Quadrille, is a depiction of Picasso's French lover, Marie-Therese Walter. Well, the portrait made its debut in Hong Kong at the start of a global tour ending in London.
More now on our top story, and that's President Trump's upcoming State of the Union address, which begins in just an hour's time. But before we get to this year's speech, let's take a look at some highlights from last year to get a sense of what we can expect.
Make America great again. The time has come for a new program of national rebuilding. I'm going to bring back millions of jobs. Protecting our workers also means reforming our system of legal immigration. And we will soon begin the construction of a great wall along our southern border. We will provide massive tax relief for the middle class. One of the largest increases in national defense spending in American history. I believe strongly in free trade, but it also has to be fair trade. The time for trivial fights is behind us.
And here with his thoughts on this year's speech is Republican strategist Ron Christie, who worked as an advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Ron, that was the president last year talking to his little mini State of the Union after he'd been talking to the joint session of Congress. But now, in an hour's time, it's the big marquee event. It's prime time. What do you make of the excerpts that the White House have released?
Well, good evening to you, Laura. I expect a very, very non-confrontational Donald Trump. I think what we saw from these excerpts tonight is that he wants to be as bipartisan as possible, reaching across the aisle to the Democrats to say, let's find ways we can work together. Let's rebuild American infrastructure. Let's find ways to lower the rancor in Washington and raise up the discourse.
But, Ron, do you think he can credibly reach across the aisle to Democrats, given what a febrile atmosphere there is right now, with the parties rowing about everything from immigration to the FBI and that Russia probe?
As long as you stay away from the Russia collusion story, yes, I do think there's an opportunity. The Democrats are in the minority party in the American government. There's no worse place to be. You can't pass legislation. You can't get anything accomplished unless you raise an olive branch to the Republicans. So I'm looking tonight for DACA, for immigration. I'm looking for some sort of way for an infrastructure deal for the president to extend a hand, if not in friendship, then certainly at least of truce, of let's find a way to bridge the gap.
The president's going to talk about a new American moment, because he does have a good story to tell, doesn't he, on the economy ahead of the looming midterm elections?
He does. I mean, our economy here has been growing at a rapid clip. You have the lowest African-American unemployment in our history, the 45 years it's been recorded. So there are a number of things that he can point to, from consumer confidence to business confidence, of, yes, America's really going quite well on our economic front.
And Ron, what do you make of the fact that the Democrats have gone back to the future in the choice of their casting for their response to the State of the Union? They're choosing a Kennedy, Representative Joe Kennedy. He's going to be speaking in Massachusetts, and he is all about the character of Donald J. Trump, and it's not complimentary.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Joe Kennedy, of course, American royalty when it comes to a political dynasty. He is the antithesis of Trump. He's very young, he's very telegenic, he looks very clean and fresh, and I think that's exactly from the excerpts we've heard from him. He's going to say character matters. And
he's going to also not pull his punches and basically describe the president as a bully.
Pretty much, and I anticipate this is exactly the wrong course. If I were the Democrats, I wouldn't go there. I would not insult the President of the United States. This is his night to go to the country and explain what's important to the country. The Democrats and Mr. Kennedy will look like they're just simply being partisan.
Ron Christie, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
The British Prime Minister is on her way to China for a trip which is effectively all about trade. Theresa May says she hopes to deepen a so-called golden era in UK-China relations ushered in by President Xi Jinping's state visit in 2015. Her trip is being seen as a test of Britain's ability to forge new economic partnerships ahead of Brexit. But as our China correspondent John Sudworth reports, getting China to lift some of its barriers to UK business may not be so easy.
No sign of a slowdown here. The Chinese economy creates 5,000 millionaires every week. And Britain, more than ever, is keen to get on board.
In the last 20 years, the mentality was to make money, right? Now, a lot of us have made money. It's all about how we use that money.
These Chinese stables are the first to be accredited by the British Horse Society. Just one example of how China's middle classes could help give the UK a post-Brexit boost.
British brands tend to be a lot quieter, but at the same time I think they can take it up a notch and compete a little bit more and elbow their way in a little bit more in comparison to other brands and other cultures.
Jaguar Land Rover is one iconic British brand that has elbowed its way in, only to face this, the Land Wind. The company has tried in vain to get China to halt production of what it says is an almost exact replica of one of its designs. Having your products copied in China is one thing, but for many British companies, getting here in the first place is a far bigger challenge. Britain is now wide open to Chinese investment, but China has done little to lower its barriers to some key British sectors like banking, finance and insurance. And despite talk of a golden era, the diplomacy doesn't always run smoothly either. One possible spanner in the works for this trip: reported disagreements over China's giant global infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative. But Jaguar Land Rover, which made 80,000 cars here last year, proves success is possible despite the challenges. It wants the UK to get serious about its China strategy.
I can only encourage the PM, but also on the dedicated levels for different industries with the different ministry levels, that we started much more intensive dialogues.
Does the golden era still exist?
For whom?
Britain-China.
I think it is still yet to come.
Meanwhile, China is fashioning its own future. Ju Hong is a Beijing-based designer with a shop in London and reams of ambition about where her country is heading.
China has had master craftsmen since ancient times. We are not just the world's factory, we are the world's high-end factory.
While the UK tries to patch together more deals and access, in a post-Brexit world, China may ask, who needs who the most? John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
You're watching a special edition of Newsday, live from Washington and Singapore. Still to come, a lunar view as you've never seen before. Why the moon is about to offer 3 rare events simultaneously. This is a special edition of Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Laura Trevelyan in Washington. Our top stories. President Trump will deliver his first State of the Union address in the coming hour. He's expected to address immigration and infrastructure.
The UK's Prime Minister Theresa May is on her way to China on a mission to get the world's most populous nation to buy British.
The case of USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, who inflicted years of abuse on more than 150 female athletes, has added momentum to plans for a new law to protect young people. A bill which would force governing bodies of amateur sports to report allegations of abuse has already been passed by the House of Representatives. One of Nassar's victims set out why now is the time to act.
Time is not on our side. We must act now. Time is up. Every minute that goes by with unanswered questions, more innocent children could be harmed. We cannot live in a society where young children's lives are destroyed at the hands of trusted adults, be it doctors, coaches, administrations, university presidents.
Our correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan has been reporting on this story from inside the court where Nasser was convicted and beyond. She explains what the bill is all about.
Some of the main points to take away from this bill, well, the first one is that if anyone reports abuse to an amateur athletics association, then under this bill it would now require that athletics association to report that abuse to the local police, and they have to do that within 24 hours. What's been the concern by many gymnasts is that if they go to someone, whether it's USA Gymnastics or a local coach, often their concerns have been put under the rug and been ignored. These women, in many cases, haven't even been believed. So now there is a compulsion that if a complaint is made, these people have to deal with it. They have to go to the police.
Rajini Vaidyanathan in Washington. Stargazers are in for a triple treat on the 31st of January, Wednesday, right here in Asia. That is tonight, when they'll get to witness a blue moon, supermoon, and a total lunar eclipse all at the same time. It's called a super blood blue moon, and it is the first time that it has happened in more than 150 years. The last time was in 1866. The chief executive of Singapore Science Center and associate professor Lim Tit Meng joined me earlier to explain it all.
Let's understand what supermoon is first, right? Supermoon is when the moon in its orbit gets closest to the Earth. So it appears brighter and bigger, and that's why it's called super. Now, why it's called a super blue moon is because typically in a month, you see only one full moon. But this month is unique. The last full moon was on the 1st of January, and this is the second full moon tonight. So when the second full moon is like a rare occasion, once in the blue moon. So it occurred in that sense. It's not going to be a blue color moon.
So it's just the literal sense. Once in a blue moon, once in 152 years. So with the solar eclipse last year, Professor, people needed special glasses to watch it. Do you need anything special to see this super blood blue moon tonight?
You don't need, because you can see the moon with your naked eyes, as long as it's not obstructed by the cloud, by tall buildings. However, through the telescope, you can see the enhanced effect. Because during the solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse, the moon will turn red.
And which particular countries and regions in the world can we actually see this triple treat moon?
Well, in Asia, in the Middle East, and North America. Where you can't see will be South America, mostly, most part of South America, Western Europe, as well as most of African continent. So in Singapore, we will see it.
All right, in Singapore, we're going to see it. Singapore and Hong Kong have the same time. Yes. At which period in the evening will we be actually getting to see this moon?
Well, around 8 o'clock tonight, all the way till about 11 p.m., about 3 hours or so, you will see how the super blue moon turning red because of the lunar eclipse.
All right, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Yes. The last one was way back in 1866, 152 years ago. Yes. So after 2018, when can we see this super blood blue moon again?
I think you and I can live to see it. Oh. It's 10 years from now.
Why 10 years from now?
Well, because of the orbit is not like a real circle round, so the timing is not as if it's constant throughout. So the next time, because of the orbital oval shape, we will see this treat in 10 years' time.
Laura, I'm looking forward to seeing this super blue blood moon in Singapore later tonight. And you've been watching a special edition of Newsday. Stay with us. We'll bring you Donald Trump's State of the Union address in full. It begins in just over half an hour at 0200 GMT right here on BBC World News.
And here in Washington, D.C., we can bring you live pictures of the White House, where the president is expected to depart from there in about 5 minutes' time. He will be heading up to Capitol Hill, where he will be delivering his very first State of the Union address to the nation. Aides say that it's going to be an uplifting, an optimistic and a patriotic speech. Stay with us here on BBC World News.